life can be hard, and it's not just like, oh, it's just your story. It's like, no, like global pandemic and geopolitical unrest and aging parents. I mean, there are a lot of legitimate life stressors. However, often it's the stories that we attach to our situations that create unnecessary anxiety. There's a certain amount of stress that we're all going to have as humans. But when we can dismantle these stories of not good enoughness or these myths about mental health, that if I admit I need help, that means there's something wrong with me, or whatever the story may be. But sussing out the story is usually task number one.
Today, I have a powerhouse woman that I cannot wait to introduce you to. And since I know you are going to love every episode of this podcast, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. So now, without further ado, I am going to introduce you to an incredible woman who I just found out hails originally from my home state, New York, and she now is living in Kansas City. And I want her to tell you her story. So I'm not even going to tease my introduction to Britt Frank. Britt, thank you so much for coming on today's podcast.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Can't wait to have this conversation.
All right. So Britt, so you are a therapist. You've written a book. You have about 100 and a gazillion followers on Instagram. So you are someone that people really listen to. But before we get into your story, tell us a little bit about where you are now and what you're passionate about and what you're hoping for going forward.
Oh, I love that question. So, well, I'm a trauma therapist and I love to speak about this stuff, mental health.
You love trauma.
I love trauma. Woo, trauma. I forget when I'm talking to non-wellness people that sounds weird. But in our sphere, it's like, of course we love talking about trauma. I don't love that people get traumatized. But right. I love knowing what we know so we can help move forward. Because I did not know the things that I knew 20 years ago and 30 years ago. Nobody talked about trauma 20 years ago. No one talked about trauma 10 years ago. So I'm super
which
passionate.
in and of itself was traumatizing for people with trauma.
It is so traumatizing to not have accurate, good information. And then it's really traumatizing to not have access to information that makes sense. So my work, I'm really passionate about taking all the gobbledygook in the academic world and making it like, let's talk about this in plain language. Let's talk about neuroscience in ways that we can relate on versus, this thing is interfering with the mechanism of that thing and snooze, snore, boring. So I just love knowing this stuff and I love talking about it and writing about it. And this is what I do. It's what I love. I live this, breathe it, eat, sleep it, and much to the detriment of my friends. I'm sure I annoy them at parties.
It's so funny you say that because I absolutely love my work too. And my husband will say to me, if we're going out to meet new people or going to a party, he goes, when people ask you what they do, they really don't want to hear everything. Like, I'm like, and this and that, and I love this. And they'll just, they're standing there and they're like, she really likes what she does, doesn't she? And maybe a little bit of the social awareness goes out the window. But a couple of things that you just said that I love. So the work that I do, my corporate work and my coaching and consulting, years ago, if you would say soft skills, which I encompass under emotional intelligence, right? Their eyes would glaze over and, I'm surprised my nose hasn't been broken from it being slammed by CEOs that like, if this doesn't impact the bottom line, go away. I'm like, oh no, it does. And what has been, criminal attorneys, prosecutors will tell you the best thing that ever happened to them is social media because, criminals text and they leave a social media trail. What has helped me, my best friend, is neuroscience, because I can now show how human behavior, how being able to create a connection, empathy, all of those soft skills impact a relationship that impacts the bottom line. Because and I know, and most of my listeners, because they're pretty sophisticated, know all. And there's very few absolutes in life. All decisions are based on emotion. But when we can tie that into neuroscience and I can show the chart, then you have people's attention. So you just mentioned that. So why don't you talk a little bit about how I call it psychobabble, you call it gobbledygook, how you've taken the gobbledygook and really transformed people's lives with it, because that is such a gift that you bring to the world.
Thank you for that. And I really love corporate speaking too. I remember I did a talk for a room full of female C-suite executives, and the topic was the science.
Excuse me, did they all have on black or navy blue? I'm just curious.
Oh, of course. Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't care where you are, that crew dresses sharp. And the topic was the science of social intelligence, why we need friends. And I could see them all just staring at me down, like, who is this person? We're actually, exact arms crossed, beautiful high-heeled shoes clacking, just like that was the scariest room I've ever stood in front of. And immediately, once you go to the neuroscience, everyone goes, oh, especially when you get to facts like, they have done meta studies across a variety of disciplines that show that not having friends is as dangerous to your physical health as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. Oh,
loneliness
that got their attention.
You.
Yes.
Loneliness kills you.
Absolutely. And that mental health is essential for the bottom line. And, when I get corporate people that are like, I don't want to have to deal with feelings and all this, I'm like, well, it's a lot more efficient for your productivity and for your bottom line to have a company full of regulated people versus dysregulated people that are, getting triggered and flipping out and not knowing why. And so I'm with you. It's really nice that things that people have been talking about for thousands and thousands of years, well beyond, modern society, the neuroscience is finally showing, yes, we need connection. Yes, we need empathy. Yes, that when you take a deep breath or you chant or you sing or you gargle or you hum, whatever, that brings you down out of the clouds into a state where your decision-making capacity becomes, usable and becomes viable versus, our brains being on fire and walking around all the time with our brains on fire. So it's so beautiful to know that the neuroscience backs up what people have known forever.
So apply that now, simplify that and operationalize that to trauma.
Okay, trauma is brain indigestion. I'm kind of over the word trauma.
Brain indigestion. I love that. I just wanted to feel that for a moment. Okay. Yeah. Let me, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me just say this. So we know that all behavior serves some type of purpose for us, positive and negative. So I would imagine this ties into that, right? You get indigestion because you eat something that's not good for you.
Or you get indigestion for whatever reason. And I love the metaphor of digestion because it's so much less loaded than the word trauma, which a lot of people, especially business people, they balk at that. Like, I don't have trauma. That's not a thing. Okay, well, everyone
because that implies feelings and they don't have feelings.
Yes, of course not. Or that something terrible happened. But just like if you eat poisoned food, you're going to get sick. But I could get indigestion from eating the same turkey sandwich that I've eaten every day. Why? Because digestion is automatic, and sometimes our bodies are out of whack and we don't know why, and it doesn't matter why. It's anything that overwhelms our digestive process is going to create symptoms. Trauma is the same way. Anytime our brain doesn't like something or is overwhelmed by something or for whatever reason is just not able to process something, then we'll have indigestion of the brain, which we call anxiety or burnout or fear or panic or what have you.
Okay. So can you give an example? And I love the fact that you're talking about digestion, because we know, actually, this is sort of kind of interesting. We know that, the mind and the body is connected, right? It's only the last 100 years, maybe, where we talked about mind and body, right? The base of the brain is attached to the tip of the spinal cord, right? And it's going back and forth. So which comes first, the thought or the emotion? We could have a great conversation on that for a long time. But we do know that within the stomach, they have found brain neurons in the stomach, right? So this, we're not really sure why, but I would imagine it's some type of information being provided to us, a mechanism of information. And I would imagine that trauma plays out like, when you don't feel well, if you're nervous or you're anxious, I get a stomach ache, right? Or when I'm nervous, I have to go to the bathroom, right? That's a digestion issue, right? Whether I ate or not. So give an example of somebody. There's so many people. I was just out to dinner last night with friends, and we were talking about the mental health crisis in the country, probably in the world. So talk about how this information, and somebody comes to you or somebody's listening and they're struggling with anxiety and depression, and maybe they appear to be functioning, but inside they're falling apart. So how would you help them?
Well, if they're coming through my door, that's half the battle right there, because a lot of people, exactly, a lot of people really operate under this assumption that doing well is end game. Doing well is a panacea. Once you're motivated, everything is fine. Once you achieve your goals, everything is fine. But it's not enough to just do well. We also want to be well. And so if someone's coming through my door, they've already reckoned with, okay, I'm doing great, but I feel terrible. And so I'm not big on trying to sell people on why they should do the work that we do. I'm more like, if you're sick and tired of feeling like everyone is patting you on the back for your accomplishments, but you can't sleep and your relationships are a mess and you constantly feel like you're about to get in trouble or that the walls are caving in. When you're ready to not feel like that, there's my door. Come on in and let's talk. But I never set out to convince, people, again, corporate people, and I love corporate people. They are wonderful. But when they're like, well, why should I listen to you? I'm like, you shouldn't. I'm like, you don't have to. If you're fine with what's going on, then great. I support you. But my hunch is you're not actually fine. You're doing great, but you're feeling not fine. And there are ways to work with, and, you don't have to. It's not a binary of if I feel good, I do poorly, or if I do well, I feel terrible. There is a way in which you can be high functioning, high productivity, and also not feel terrible all the time. And so I help people primarily with taking out these stories that do us absolutely no good, and they're inaccurate. These stories of, if I'm happy and calm, I won't be as motivated. That's an interesting one. The story of, I need anxiety because
what's interesting? Tell us more about that. You said, what's interesting about that?
Just where did that story come from? Like, that belief is so firmly ingrained that if I'm happy, I will be lazy. That one I've seen and heard often enough that's a belief that people have.
If you're happy, you will be lazy as opposed to content?
No, if I'm happy, I will be lazy as opposed to productive and motivated, i.e. I have all of these goals and all of these things I want to do. And if I'm just happy, I'm just going to be sitting around feeling happy and I won't get anything done.
It's so interesting. I haven't heard that before, although I did read that. It's actually on my notes here. But you can be happy in one area of your life, but you can still be ambitious and wanting to learn in another area of your life. So where did that story come from?
I have no idea. I mean, I have absolutely no idea, but I do know it is often the stories that we tell ourselves that creates, life can be hard, and it's not just like, it's just your story. It's like, no, like global pandemic and geopolitical unrest and aging parents and sick children. I mean, there are a lot of legitimate life stressors. However, often it's the stories that we attach to our situations that create unnecessary anxiety. There's a certain amount of stress that we're all going to have as humans. Sure. But when we can dismantle these stories of not good enoughness or these myths about mental health, that if I admit I need help, that means there's something wrong with me, or whatever the story may be. But sussing out the story is usually task number one of feeling better. What's the story that you're telling yourself?
So do you see patterns in the stories over your practice over time?
Oh, sure. Imposter syndrome is a fun one. I hear that one from every single level, every single socioeconomic, like everyone has imposter syndrome. You have it, I have it, whoever's listening to this has it to a degree, not always. But it's so nice to know that is a universal experience, because if we all have it, then we don't have to worry about overcoming it. It's just knowing that's just a thing that we all have.
So you will, if this is a fair statement, you will normalize the thought, the unproductive thought?
Normalizing, yes. And sometimes people will normalize something, and then that just means like now they have to live with it. And that's not true for everything. Like you can normalize that life is hard, but that doesn't mean there's nothing that can be done. But with imposter syndrome, normalizing it makes it not just your thing. So if you're in a room full of very, very intelligent people, knowing that they all feel it does help to take some of the sting out of it. It's a lot easier to walk into a room if you know everyone has it.
Well, it goes back to how we started our conversation, knowing you're not alone, even in the story. Right. It is amazing because working with so many high functioning people, it is amazing that they're like, everybody else sees that I'm talented, everybody else, but how come I don't feel it? You know, that type of story. So what do you offer? Like, I read something about where you said remembering what happened without re-experiencing what happened. So talk about how you put that into play, helping somebody and trauma is on a spectrum, right? So I would imagine that your work, your techniques, it's the platform and the baseline, and then it's also within the spectrum. So it's probably not all that different for someone with severe trauma versus someone that has the trauma of, even something so simple as, oh my gosh, I was late for a really important meeting. There's a lot of anxiety attached to that. So what do you do? How do you help them? How do you help them help themselves? How do you help them?
So there's the split of people who want to dive into the past and spend hours in analysis and figuring out the how and the who and the why. And so for that crew, we want to bring them out of the past and focus on what's happening here and now. But then you also have the crew that's like, whatever happened in the past is in the past. There's no point in going back there. And for that crew, it's, well, the past doesn't actually stay in the past. The past stays in your nervous system. So if you're constantly bumping up against the same stuff, then we may want to just look in the rearview mirror. And there's a reason the rearview mirror is small and your windshield is large. We don't want to stay in the past. And this isn't about another story I hear is I don't want to do this whole talking about childhood blaming the parents thing. It's like, that's not necessary, but it does help if you have a pattern in the present to know that the past is in the present in the form of patterns and symptoms.
Well, the past informs your present, right?
Yes.
And what I tell people, anything in life, whether therapy, work, coach, anything, you only look backwards in the service of moving forward. Otherwise, you get yourself stuck in the past, and that doesn't help.
Exactly. So we want to take the fear of the past or the fascination of the past and regulate it to, like what you just said, the past is there to inform our work now so we can move forward. So for people who are way too past focused or way past avoidant, we want to be able to give the past a smaller size of the pie in terms of therapy. I don't spend a lot of time digging around in the past. It's just what happened and where, if that's available. Sometimes that information is not available, and that's okay. That's another beautiful thing about what we know now about the neuroscience. You don't need to remember your past to heal from past patterns. How marvelous is that?
Right. Okay. So talk a little bit about, get a little techie on, a little nerdy on us.
Okay.
And you said that our brain forgets nothing, right? So when you said consciously, people might not remember the trauma consciously, but the nervous system remembers the trauma. So how do you work through that with somebody?
So
and what is that science that people can hang their hat on? So that understanding sometimes is, you say that's a start. To me, many times that cognitive understanding is, all right, I'll use the baseball analogy. Now you're on second base.
I love that. So, okay, if we want to geek out, we're talking about implicit versus explicit memory. So explicit memory, narrative memory. What did you have for breakfast this morning? Oh, I remember that I woke up and had my coffee and had my eggs. Okay, so that is explicit memory. It's I recall the story of what happened. Cool. But that's not the only type of memory. We also have what's called implicit memory or somatic memory or body-based memories. And that might be why when you smell an apple pie, instantly you're transplanted back into your grandmother's kitchen at Christmas time or holiday of choice. And so implicit memories are just our bodies recording what things felt like, what they seemed like, and there's not a story attached to them. So a good example would be, let's say as an infant, when we're infants, we don't have any cognitive structure to support narrative memory. That's why you don't remember things when you're 2 months old. But let's say at 2 months old, every single day there were gunshots going off around you, every single day. And then when you were 2, your parents moved you to a different neighborhood. Fine. Let's say you blocked that out completely, but somehow every time you hear drums or fireworks, all of a sudden you're panicking and you don't know why.
Okay, hang on one second. Let me just ask for clarification.
Sure.
So at 2 months, you don't have a memory because you don't have the structure, right? Because the brain isn't developed enough.
Right.
So then how do you have that still stored if you never had it to begin with?
Well, you don't have the explicit memory. You have the implicit memory, the body memory.
Which is the feel. Okay.
The feelings, yes.
Somatic,
the implicit memory is the somatic piece. So let's say you come into my office at 30 going, every time I hear fireworks, I don't know what happens to me. I'm panicking and I'm sweating and there's no logical reason. What's wrong with me? Do I have a disorder? Now, you and I are never going to get to that story because you won't remember it. But it's helpful to know that implicitly, for whatever reason, it doesn't matter why, your body decided that that noise equals danger. We don't need to know at 2 months it was because of gunshots, or at 3 months it was because your brother yelled in your face and scared. It doesn't matter. It's just,
or it was fireworks.
Or firework. It could be anything, right? It's not always I was abused and therefore it's trauma. It's implicit memory tells us that we can have body reactions for no, quote, logical or narrative-based reason.
All right, I'm going to interrupt you. I want you to repeat that because for our listeners, you just normalized trauma. You just made it feel not bad, not negative. So repeat that for the listeners, because that is such a gift to everybody. Thank you for that. I love what you just said. So please repeat that.
Sure. Which part?
The part about trauma doesn't have to be bad.
Yes.
But you had the implicit memory. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So you could have
a gunshot versus fireworks. Fireworks could be a celebration. A gunshot's not so good. Yeah.
Exactly. So you can, the shorthand is you can have brain indigestion. You can experience trauma from things that aren't always bad. Sometimes good things can unintentionally create fear responses in the body. And that takes some of the pressure off, that just because you have anxiety doesn't mean you were abused. It may be, but it doesn't always mean that. Just because you have depression doesn't mean you had bad parent. I hear this from my parents were good. I don't know what's wrong with me. It's like, well, there's a lot of ways your nervous system could encode an experience and, code it as this is bad, this is scary, this is dangerous. And our work isn't to figure out where that happened. Our work is to take the response and the stimulus and create some space so that we teach your brain, loud noises don't actually immediately equal danger. And there are ways of working to do that.
Right. Well, I was just thinking, you have great parents, but you were in a car accident at 3.
Right.
It's an experience. So
yes, that's why the word trauma I tend to veer away from. And I just call it either indigestion of the brain or just your body got stuck somewhere, and we can work with that because it takes a lot of the weight off the trauma. People think trauma equals abuse, trauma equals assault, trauma equals natural disaster.
Negative. Yeah.
Right. But trauma is anything that overwhelms our brain for whatever reason. And good things can cause trauma. And on the flip side, sometimes you can have a bad experience and not have any lasting consequences. That's why you can.
Is that true?
It is true. You can be.
Why is that? Why is that? Why is that the case?
Why do some people not get traumatized by bad things?
Yeah. By trauma.
Gosh. They've done a lot of studies on this that, genetics, environment, community support, your ability to have in real time somebody there to help you. So let's say as a child, something scary happens, but a caregiver immediately said to you, I'm here, you're safe, I've got you. You may not be traumatized long-term by that. Similarly, something neutral or good can create lots of trauma. So there's a lot of reasons, from environment to genetics to what are the stressors in your life to what sort of resources and support do you have. We don't get to choose what will and what will not traumatize us, unfortunately.
So is there an impact on what for many people say that really have had what most people consider traumatic, negative, not good, right? The thinking, I believe, used to be that the way people came out of that trauma, let even just say war, right, is many ways influenced, not direct cause and effect, but influenced by what their mental health was prior to that experience. Is that true? Is that a myth?
I think there's a bit of truth in almost everything that people share and teach, and nothing is the be all end all, right? Yeah. There is no absolute with that. So again, you could have all the resources and on paper look like, well, this shouldn't have traumatized you because you had X, Y, and Z. Nevertheless, it does. And that's why I really advocate taking this, why is this a thing, out of the equation. If we're just talking being efficient with our wellness, I don't know why this is a thing, but it is. So let's deal with it, because we can figure out the how and the why, but why something happened doesn't necessarily mean that you feel better. I really like insight and understanding whys, but not at step one. Like, let's get you feeling better. Let's get you moving. And then later on, we can maybe get some insight into the how and the why, but don't start with why.
Do that? How do you do that in terms of getting them to feel better right out of the gate?
So again, the information is the first piece. Hey, you have a brain. Here's how your brain works. You have a gas pedal and a brake pedal, and either one can get stuck. If your gas pedal is stuck, you're going to feel racing thoughts and insomnia and lack of appetite and anxiety and panic. If your brake pedal is stuck, you're going to feel fatigue and just feeling blah and feeling depressed and feeling, quote, unmotivated and all of those things. So let's start with, hey, your brain is like a car. It has a gas pedal and a brake pedal. Cool. Now that we know that, a brain stuck in the on direction needs a different intervention than a brain stuck in the off direction. And then we can strategize. What are your resources that help you feel up when you're too down, and that help you come down when you're too up? Like, it's not always punch a pillow and, take a walk and eat your vegetables and get sunshine. There's lots of ways of bringing you out of the rafters when you're too far up and bringing you up when you're too far down. And
so give an example. Give an example if somebody is feeling stuck, and we'll talk about the science of stuck in a little bit. And they just can't get out of bed. They'll say they can't get motivated. They know they'd feel better if they take a walk. What would you say? What's an intervention for that?
So that'll be environment dependent. The first question is, okay, what's actually going on here? When you get out of bed, what are you walking into? If you're in an abusive marriage where you don't have enough money and you don't know how you're going to pay the rent and you have a child that's screaming, that's going to be a lot different than I wake up and I have all my needs met and I don't know what's wrong with me, but I can't get out of bed. But what's really going on is you're dissatisfied. And even though your marriage seems fine, you want out, but you feel guilty because it's too good to leave, but it's too bad to stay. And we need to know what's really going on here. And that's where we need to become very ruthless in our willingness to get honest about what are the factors here.
What if they're, let's see, I'm just trying to think. What if they're just, their life isn't going in their life didn't take the direction they thought it would.
Sure.
And they live alone, but they wanted it to look different. And it's not. And it's not horrible, but it's not what they will hope, not what they thought it would be.
Well, I guarantee you for that, the story that person has is what's wrong with me? I should be grateful for the life that I have. And
Correct.
that story prohibits the grieving process that is a prerequisite to feeling better. So that story of I should be happy. This is stupid. I'm such an ungrateful, like my life is good enough. Like it's not the way I wanted it to be, but it's fine. It's like, well, yeah, but you're not fine. And so we need to create space for you get to be sad about things not working. That doesn't mean that we're going to spin you out into this victim place, and having perspective on things like privilege and access to resources is good. But if you're sad, let's create space for sad. If you're mad,
so what do? Do you give it a time limit? Like you can have a pity party. I'm joking, but not really. So you can have a pity party for 15 minutes and then move on.
That works for some people, but it's really like, what's the task here? If the task is grieving, it's not so much have a pity party and then move on. It's okay, where in your day are you going to create space for sad? Do you have 20 minutes
throughout the day?
Yeah. Because
at
we don't want
intervals.
Yes, we don't want these big, huge, catharsis. The neuroscience has shown catharsis is not that good for us, because even if it's a big wave of emotion that feels good, like a big cry often feels good, but then we get that emotional hangover and we're like
you're
sort
exhausted.
So we want to, they call this in trauma work titrating. We want to give little tiny doses.
Science. Yeah.
Exactly. Yay, science.
Of the chemistry. Thing. So remember back in the day.
Yes. When I was going through my version of, oh my gosh, everything is crap and how am I going to do this? It was like 5 minutes in the car before I would have to go into a place of, I'm just going to be really mad. I'm going to before I have to put on a happy face and like be on, I'm going to give myself 5 minutes in the car to be really mad and not shame myself for my feelings. Anyone's body can handle 300 seconds of any emotion, because we're talking 3 to 5 minutes. So space where it's not limit your pity, it's where are you going to expand your capacity and your willingness to feel what's real? Because when we lie to ourselves about ourselves, we're going to get stuck. That's a guarantee.
Here's the thing about what you just said. We can lie cognitively to ourselves all we want, but the body doesn't lie.
Never.
And the body knows. And that's where people get crazy, because you like a mother can tell the kid, oh, you're not sad, you're happy. And the kid's like, no, I'm feeling sad. But if you hear that long enough, then you get confused and you don't even trust your emotions anymore. But the whole concept of emotions that are repressed get amplified. So you deny the emotion, it's going to crop up somewhere else. So now, and when I do work with emotional intelligence, we used to talk about innate feeling our emotions and being able, I forget the word because I never use it anymore, but now it's like, okay, we want to manage emotions. We don't want to deny it. And counterintuitively, the more you allow yourself to feel it, then you can work it through, although it gets pretty dark at some point. And then counterintuitively, you come out. It's like when you have a muscle, you have to work the muscle. It's hard, and then it just loosens up. So that's what happens with the trauma that you're describing. But you do it in
small titrated doses. That way it doesn't become overwhelming, because it's counterintuitive. But when you're anxious, sometimes taking a deep breath is going to make things worse. Even though you'll hear this out in culture, like, oh, if you're anxious, do some deep breathing, do some belly breathing, do some box breathing, do some 4-7-9 breathing. And for some people that works. But for other people, telling your body to calm down is going to piss it off. And then it's going to become even more amplified.
So how do you differentiate that? How do you know? Because you're right. That is the common wisdom.
I mean, try it. And if it doesn't work, then do something else. So it's never, deep breathing isn't bad. It's never that it's wrong. But I know for me personally, I mean, think about it doesn't if you were in a fight with your spouse and they told you to calm down, like who in the history?
Oh, that makes you more furious.
Exactly. And our bodies are very much the same way. So rather than telling an anxious system, just calm down, just breathe. How about validating? Oh my God. And talk to your body. This sounds so sort of like woo-woo, but this neuroscience shows this works. Talking to your body and saying, wow, it makes sense that you're feeling anxious. I don't actually know why you're feeling anxious, but I know that you're not crazy, because that's crazy is not a thing. There's no such thing as a crazy person. I don't understand these symptoms, but I'm sure it will make sense. And then it's, okay, what are my choices for people, places, or things that can help me feel less bad?
Oh, okay. So you just said something, and this is a really important point. People many times don't feel like they have choices. So if you said to someone, what are your choices? And they're like, what choices? You think I'm choosing to feel this way? What do you do with that?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love I have no choices. It's like, well, okay, how true is that story? Because you may not like your choices, but unless you're actively being oppressed or you're actively in a traumatic environment.
Right.
There are
always,
right. There's always something. You may not be able to get out of bed, but you could choose to maybe flip to the other side of your bed. If you're going to stay in bed, shake up the snow globe of your brain and lay, foot to head, because anytime we change a pattern, we can help our brain snap out of whatever thing it's stuck in. So you may say to me, that's a stupid choice. I don't like that choice. Well, you may not like it, but if you can't get out of bed, and if you can't summon the will to do that meditation thing on your Calm app, and you don't feel like making a phone call, what are 3 choices that you have available to you right now? Not after you buy the day planner and the stickers, not after you get all the clothing and the gear. What are 3 viable choices, no matter how tiny, that are available to you? And it's almost never the case that there are no choices. It's just, I don't like these choices.
Not like the choices.
That's okay. But I don't care if you like them. But anywhere you can make a choice, you're teaching your brain that it's safe to move. It's safe to come out of stuck. But nobody wants to do the little micro things because they're not very fun. And you're not going to Facebook Live, hey, look, I rolled over in bed, or I put on different socks. Like, no one wants to talk about that because it's not exciting.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about what you're saying, though, and I can really feel it. If you're in bed and you're cocooned up in bed, right? And even though you want to get out, there's something very safe. As we said before, all behavior serves us. So whatever the day is that I don't want to face, even if it's a story I created, let me double down into my little cocoon. So we know that movement, the neuroscience behind the moving, and right, just the fact of moving shakes you out, and then you're not feeling so safe lying in bed, so you might as well get up anyway, because if you're not going to feel safe, you cannot feel safe getting up, as opposed
exactly. And I can't tell you how many arguments I've had with people who are like, well, that's stupid. How am I going to get anywhere if all I'm doing is shifting where I'm laying in bed?
Then they don't understand the neuroscience.
Then it's get out the whiteboard and explain, here's what happens to your brain when you move from foot to head, or from head to foot.
So explain.
To foot to head. It disorients your brain. So if you try this, it feels uncomfortable, which is the point. If you're in your bed and your brain is used to, I lay on my pillow on my left side with the headboard behind me and the blanket is on me, that's a pattern. And we know our brains are organized for pattern seeking. Our brains love autopilot, things it doesn't have, because it conserves energy to not have to think. So I'm in my usual position. Okay, so now I'm shifting and I'm laying with my head where my feet are, and my foot on the headboard. That's going to be a pattern breaking because we've not done that. And so now my brain is going to be like, we don't know what this is. This is not our pattern. This doesn't feel good. It's going to feel weird. Great. Weird breaks the autopilot. I always say autopilot is like the handmaiden of being stuck. We want to break this autopilot thing. You've now broken your pattern because you're sleeping in a weird, or you're laying in a weird position. Now that creates space for you to move because your brain's disoriented. Great. If we can break the autopilot, it's sort of like in physics, an object in motion will stay in motion, the principle of inertia. Yep. So if you can break the pattern, you can get moving.
Well, and what I say for that is that you're taking, if you look at your brain as a highway, you're taking a new highway. You're creating a new pathway, right? Like I talk neural pathway. So if you change your position, oh, wait, I've never been on this road before. Maybe I should pay attention.
Yes. And that breaks the cycle of stuck, because if you're on a road, if you're on the same highway that you've taken 100,000 times, you could zone out, you can listen to the radio and drink your coffee and do whatever. But if you're on a path you've never been, then like you said, it's like, oh, now I have to do what's called orienting. Now I have to orient, meaning I have to see, I have to notice, and a brain that can orient can move. And that orienting is one of the first tasks if you're anxious or depressed.
Great. So I was hoping we'd have some extra time, but I've been we babbled a little bit. Well, I babbled a little bit before. So I just want to ask this question. So I know people are always asking you about your past and your failures and your, all your addictions and stuff. So what I would like you to talk about, if you're open to it, is just, if you're comfortable, to just share with the listeners, perhaps your most profound failure, because we know that gave you your most profound growth, and how that enriches you today.
Oh, that's good. I like that question. So having to fail at a job that I really was very good at, because my personal life was falling apart, my self-care was falling apart, I was anxious, I was depressed, I was addicted, it was all, and it eventually got to the point where I couldn't work anymore. And then I had a very public, I'm having a meltdown, and everyone at the company knew it, and it was not quiet that Britt is losing her marbles, and like she can't hack it. And that was a really profoundly unpleasant moment, but that was my moment of surrender. That was when, because up until that point, I could always justify feeling terrible by, well, at least I'm functional. I can get up and go to work. Like, yeah, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, but I'm still producing. I'm still getting it done. So I'm fine. And that sort of broke the spell of I'm fine. And nothing can change until you're willing to name that it's not working. And that was one of the things that broke through my denial of, nope, super not fine. Can no longer pretend I'm fine. And that was when it was like, okay, maybe I could use some help here.
And yet the science of stuck wasn't written yet. It wasn't even born. Mm-hmm. So how did you get help? Like, what helped you?
Yeah, I wrote the book now that I could have used then. So what helped me then was I just tried everything. I read a bunch of books. I tried stuff that worked. I tried stuff that was super not helpful. I went to therapists that were useful. I went to therapists that were profoundly damaging. And I sort of just beat my head on different walls and different doors to see what's going to work here. Okay, cool. That worked. Okay, that didn't work. And then eventually I cobbled together my own path. And that's so unnecessary, because now that I know a few things, I mean, my way isn't the only way, but I'm really happy to share, hey, here are some things that you're told to do that you're told that work, but like, here's why they might not work. Like, I spent so much time beating myself up because breath work didn't work for me. Right. And I didn't understand why breath work didn't work for me. Well, I have assault trauma with strangulation. So anytime I'm depriving myself of naturally like rhythmed breathing, my body's going to start to freak out. So for me, breath work doesn't work. And instead of spending 3 months going to class and feeling like crap, it would have been helpful to know, hey, breath work's not for everybody. Yeah. And so I'm really happy to share now, the things that we're told are the good things aren't always the good things for everybody in every circumstance. Mm-hmm. So I just found out by trial and error.
Okay. So the great message there is what works for one doesn't work for someone else. And yes. Isn't that true for all of human nature? I mean, I tell people all the time, if there was one right way to raise a kid, there wouldn't be so many child psychology theories.
It's so true, but we very quickly forget because we're told and sold on this idea that this is the way to do it. Here's how you do the work. Here's how you get yourself mentally strong. Here's how you build resilience. And it's like, cool, that's one path. There are many. And the only wrong path is a path that, harms somebody else. But there are a million ways, and yourself, there are a million ways to be injured, and there are a million ways to heal. And so you get to get creative and do weird things and try things that you may not have thought of, and say no to things that are typically thought of as good. And again, taking the story of this shouldn't be so hard for me. Well, it is. So, okay, let's pivot and do something else.
Well, and what you said is, I mean, I also like reframing where, the complexity of life, you can look at it as is mind-boggling in a negative way, but the complexity of life is so, I think it's awesome. It can be hard. But if you think about, everybody has a different life experience and a collective life experience as to where they're from and what's important to them. everybody reacts differently. So people, will not be one size fits all. I mean, I grew up in a family of one of five. Every single one of us live our life. It appears that we live our lives very differently. Having said that, there is a common denominator to all of us. But so what would work for one of us, the other one would say, "Are you out of your mind? I'm not doing that. That's crazy." And the other person's like, "Oh my God, I love this."
Yes, exactly. And again, without beating ourselves up. Same thing with therapists.
Just is.
I'm not everybody's cup of tea. So that doesn't mean that I'm a bad therapist, and it doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong. But if it's not a fit, fortunately, there's 5,000 people in the wellness world. So I'm a big fan of don't necessarily quit right away when it's hard, but you can say to yourself, if this isn't a fit, I don't need to force it. I can try other things, try 5 different people and see what works for you. Try 5 different techniques and see what resonates with you. And don't assume that the problem is you if something isn't working that you think, quote, should be working.
Right. Okay. So tell us about your book, The Science of Stuck. What would you like people to know, other than, of course, later on we'll share with them how they can get it so they can purchase it and really consume your wisdom in its entirety?
Thank you for that. So The Science of Stuck, I really love that this was the book I got to write because it is the book I could have so used, which is, we all have a stack of self-help books laying around collecting dust. And when you're
right behind you.
Yep, they're there. I read them at this point. But when you're in the weeds, when you're overwhelmed, when life is flying at you 1,000 miles an hour, you don't have the bandwidth to read them all. So The Science of Stuck is not, here's Britt's, here's Britt's advice on how to live your best life. It's no, here's Britt's show and tell of 25 years of trying stuff. Like, hey guys, here are the 5 bottom line things that I think you should know about trauma to get started. Here are just 5 bottom line things about boundaries, about relationships, about intimacy. And all of the exercises in the book I designed to be done in 5 minutes or less. Because I know that when I was reading self-help books early on, and I would come to an exercise that's like, now set aside some quiet time and, clear your space and get a journal and do this. I'm like, nope, next. I don't have time for this. Everyone has 300 seconds to try a self-help exercise. So there's nothing in the book that requires a lot of time. I wrote the book that you can open to any page and grab a nugget. You don't have to read it sequentially. You can skip things that are irrelevant. I made it very choose your own adventure, user friendly, because that's what I wish that I had. And if you want a deep dive, I've stuffed a bunch of footnotes in there with little rabbit trails that you can follow if that's your, if that brings you joy. It's there for you, but it's certainly not necessary. It's a very easy read with bottom line, here's my show and tell of everything that I thought was useful to know.
Great. Okay. So, and we'll talk more about how people can get the book, because I think the book is fascinating and it's practical, right? Whenever people say, well, you can do this, you can, people listen and say, yeah, I'm not doing that. I know me, I'm a native New Yorker, as we talked about. Like, to me, I'm like, I have no time for that.
Yeah.
Although my husband will tell you, I have time for whatever I want to have time for. True. But share with us other than your own, the last book you reread and why.
The last book that I reread. What was the last book that I reread and why? The last book that I really dove into that I really loved was The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron, because that was the very, very first sort of self-helpy type book I came across. And every time I visit it, I find something new, something beautiful and profound. And I think that is the gold standard. And even if you're not an artist, even if you don't identify as a creative person, it doesn't matter. I'm not a visual artist. And that book, I think, is just so full of good human stuff. And I think she's brilliant. And every time I visit it, I learn something new. So I like to revisit that. The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. Yeah.
Great. And then this question, I think, excuse me. Did I lose you?
No, I'm still here.
Okay. This question, I think you'll love. This question feels like it would resonate with you. I always figure out which questions I want to ask based upon the person. What's the one song you can't live without?
Oh, Oh, that's a really good question. Okay, so I have like my here's what I think should be a good answer, and then I'm like, okay, what's my real one song that I
Yes, give
can't
us
live
both.
without? Um, so John Williams like movie scores are always my like
Okay.
pump myself like the Superman theme song, the Indiana Jones theme song. Like I just am a John Williams music like that. I just cannot go through a day without having something on my Spotify with John Williams music. Come
So
on.
that sounds like it's inspirational and motivational kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it just feels I've listened to it enough before doing hard things that have gone well that now my brain knows it's going to get really pumped up and excited to hear
Mhm.
those types of songs. So,
You trained your brain.
yes. So that's a great question. Yeah, I think that's
And
is
what's
that accurate? Yeah, that's accurate.
and what was the one that you thought it should have been?
Oh, I feel like it's, like what's a song I can't live without, like an oldie or something cool or like a
Oh,
classic, but I'm not that
or
cool. And
Beethoven's Fifth.
right, something either really intelligent and smart or something like super cool and trendy. And like I like Broadway music and I like movie scores. Like that's just my thing.
Great, great. So what's the one thing or the one question that I didn't ask that you would like to provide the answer to for the listeners?
Um, Procrastination is never because of laziness. We procrastinate because there's something that we're benefiting from not doing the thing we say we want to do. So, procrastination is a suboptimal way to protect ourselves from either being embarrassed or being ashamed or failing or whatever. But procrastination is never because you're lazy. And so I really like dismantling this, like, I'm just a lazy person. No, you're not. You may be a fear based person. Your brain might
Mm-hmm.
be locked in a shutdown response, but procrastination is a physiological fear response. It is not a moral issue, and we can work with it.
So I love everything about your approach because it all comes from a place of acceptance and not judgment.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. So tell the listeners how they can get your book, how they can learn more about you, how they can follow you, and how they continue to grow from your wisdom.
Thank you. So my website is scienceofstuck.com, and the book, The Science of Stuck, you can buy wherever you buy books. You can get it on Amazon or a bookstore or wherever you like to buy books. And on Instagram, it's just my name at Britt Frank, and Britt has 2 T's. So come say hello. I love meeting people from doing things like this. It makes it more real. I'm like, oh, hi, you're a person and I'm a person, and now we're connecting. That's cool.
Oh, that's great. That is great. So thank you so much. This was so informative, fun, educational, all good things. So I really appreciate this today.
Thank you so much. This was fun.